In the heart of the galaxy's most luxurious orbital pavilion, a human server moved unseen among alien elites, hiding a past forged in the fires of war. But when a sudden breach shattered the walls and armed raiders stormed in, her calm gaze and precise steps became the only thing standing between peace and chaos. What happened next would not only decide the fate of the night, but could alter the balance of power across the stars. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. Under the soft glow of the Starlight Pavilion's crystal walls, Lyra Kane moved between tables with the quiet grace of someone who had learned to be invisible. The orbital dining hall floated in perfect balance between Mars and its moon Phobos, a jewel of diplomacy where alien leaders came to negotiate trade deals that could shift the fate of entire worlds. The view beyond the transparent panels was breathtaking. Mars glowed red and silent, while the blackness of space stretched endlessly, dotted with distant stars. The pavilion was a place of wealth and power. Every table was a stage for political theater. Alien dignitaries in shimmering robes or plated armor spoke in low voices, their words carrying the weight of planetary economies. The air was filled with the scent of rare spices from across the galaxy, mingling with the faint hum of the gravity stabilizers. Lyra wore the standard black uniform of the human staff. It was designed to make them blend into the background, a reminder that humans were still newcomers to the galactic stage. Only 20 years had passed since first contact, and in places like this, humans were often treated as curiosities or servants. She had learned to keep her hazel eyes calm and her voice neutral, no matter what was said to her. At one table, a group of wealthy traders from the Voran Alliance laughed loudly, their voices carrying across the room. They spoke about humans as if they were not present, making jokes about Earth's primitive technology and short lifespans. Lyra kept her expression steady as she poured a rare drink into their crystal glasses. The liquid shimmered with silver threads, dangerous to touch, but prized by those who could afford it. What the guests did not know was that Lyra Kane had once worn a different uniform. Years ago, she had been a lieutenant in the Earth Defense Vanguard, serving in the Orion border conflicts. She had fought in battles where the odds were impossible, where survival depended on quick thinking and absolute focus. She had seen worlds burn and had walked away from the military with scars no one could see. Now, she preferred the quiet life, serving drinks, earning credits, staying out of trouble. But the instincts she had honed in war never left her. She noticed details others missed, the way someone's hands trembled, the shift in a voice when danger was near, the subtle patterns of movement that spoke of hidden intent. As she moved toward the service station, her attention caught on 3 insectoid dockhands seated at a corner table. They were drinking heavily, but their posture was tense. Their antennae twitched in a pattern she recognized from her military days. It was a silent code used before an attack. They kept glancing toward the main entrance, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the light in sharp flashes. Lyra's steps slowed for just a moment before she continued on. She did not look at them again, but her mind was already calculating possibilities. She counted the exits. She noted the positions of the pavilion's security drones. She measured the distance to the control hub in the back corridors. At another table, Envoy Talrin of the Dravari sat alone. His scaled skin caught the light in muted shades of green and gold. Unlike most patrons, he did not treat the human staff as invisible. He watched with quiet interest, his 4 eyes following Lyra's movements. She had noticed him before, always observing, never speaking more than a polite greeting. Gregor, the human floor manager, intercepted her near the bar. His voice was low and urgent. He reminded her to stay away from the envoy's table. There was an important negotiation scheduled for the next day, and he did not want any human mistakes to cause trouble. Lyra nodded without argument. She had learned long ago that some battles were not worth fighting. She returned to her rounds, refilling glasses and clearing plates. The rhythm of the night continued, but the tension in her chest did not fade. She could still see the dockhands in her peripheral vision, their movements sharp and deliberate. The Starlight Pavilion was designed to feel safe. Its walls were made of reinforced crystal alloy. Its security systems were advanced enough to detect most threats before they entered. But Lyra knew that no place was truly secure. She had seen too many strongholds fall. As she passed the panoramic window, she glanced out at Mars. The planet's surface was a swirl of dust storms and deep canyons. It looked peaceful from here, but she knew that appearances could be deceiving. A soft chime signaled the arrival of a new group of guests. The main entrance opened, and a wave of cooler air swept into the room. Lyra turned to greet them, her expression calm, her voice steady. But her mind was still on the dockhands, still on the way their antennae moved, still on the way they kept checking the door. She carried a tray of drinks to a table near the center of the room. The laughter of the Voran traders rang out again, sharp and mocking. She set the glasses down with practiced precision, her hands steady. In the far corner, Envoy Talrin's gaze met hers for a brief moment. There was something in his expression she could not read. Curiosity, caution, perhaps even recognition. Lyra moved on, her steps measured, her breathing even. But inside, she was already preparing. She did not know when or how, but she was certain the night would not end as it began. The calm before the breach had begun, and she was ready. The first sign came as a tremor beneath the floor. It was so slight that most guests did not notice, but Lyra Kane felt it through the soles of her shoes. Her instincts sharpened instantly. She had felt that kind of vibration before, the kind that came just before a breach. The Starlight Pavilion's soft music and quiet conversation were shattered by a deep metallic crack. The main airlock door buckled inward, its reinforced frame twisting under invisible pressure. In the next second, a blinding pulse of blue light tore through the entrance. The graviton shockwave hit the room like a silent explosion, sending tables, chairs, and guests tumbling into the air as the gravity stabilizers faltered. Alien dignitaries cried out in alarm. Crystal glasses shattered midair, their contents scattering in glittering arcs. The pavilion's security drones zipped toward the breach, but before they could fire, a second pulse ripped through the room, frying their circuits. The drones dropped lifeless to the floor. 6 figures stepped through the smoking doorway. They wore matte black armor that absorbed the light, their helmets shaped like the angular skulls of predators. Each carried a plasma rifle, the barrels glowing with unstable energy. Their movements were sharp and coordinated, the kind of precision that came from years of working as a single unit. The leader's voice cut through the chaos, amplified by a helmet speaker. He demanded access to the pavilion's secure vault, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The vault was more than a storage room. It held trade agreements, rare artifacts, and classified data that could destabilize entire star systems if stolen. Panic spread quickly. Guests scrambled for cover behind overturned tables and shattered display cases. Some species clung to the walls, their limbs adapted for zero gravity, while others huddled together in fear. The pavilion's staff froze, unsure whether to run or hide. Lyra did neither. She stayed low, her eyes scanning the room. She counted the attackers. 6 in total. 2 guarding the entrance, 2 moving toward the vault access corridor, and 2 sweeping the room for resistance. She noted their weapons, their armor, and the way they moved. They were professionals. Her gaze flicked to Envoy Talrin. He was still seated at his table, his scaled hands resting calmly on the surface. His 4 eyes were fixed on her, as if he knew she was already calculating a response. The attackers began herding guests toward the center of the room. One of them shoved a Vorin traitor to the ground when he hesitated. Another fired a warning shot into the ceiling, sending shards of crystal alloy raining down. Lyra's mind worked quickly. The control hub was in the service corridor behind the bar. If she could reach it, she might be able to override the lockdown and activate the emergency defense systems. But the path was exposed, and any sudden movement would draw attention. She picked up a fallen tray and began moving toward the bar, keeping her posture low and her pace steady. To anyone watching, she looked like a frightened server trying to get out of the way. In reality, she was positioning herself for the next step. The leader barked an order, and 2 of the raiders moved toward the vault. Lyra knew she had only minutes before they breached it. She slipped behind the bar, crouching low as she reached the service corridor door. The air in the corridor was cooler, the hum of the machinery louder. She moved quickly, her steps silent on the metal floor. The control hub was just ahead, its door half open. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by the glow of status screens. She slid into the chair and began working. The main defense systems were offline, locked out by the raiders' override codes. She bypassed the primary interface and accessed the secondary controls. The gravity stabilizers were still functional. She rerouted power to them, preparing to shift the gravity in the main dining hall without warning. Back in the hall, Envoy Talrin was speaking to the leader. His voice was calm, measured, offering to negotiate. It was a distraction, and Lyra knew it. He was buying her time. She adjusted the stabilizer controls, setting them to cycle between heavy gravity and near-zero gravity in rapid bursts. It would disorient the attackers, making it harder for them to aim or move effectively. Her fingers hovered over the activation key. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. Once she triggered the shift, she would have to move fast. The raiders would know someone was interfering, and they would come looking for her. In the dining hall, one of the raiders shouted, pointing toward the bar. They had noticed her absence. The leader turned his helmet toward the service corridor, his posture tightening. Lyra pressed the activation key. In an instant, the gravity in the main hall surged, slamming the attackers to the floor. Guests cried out as they were pinned down, their bodies suddenly heavy. Before the raiders could recover, the gravity dropped to near zero, sending them floating upward in confusion. Weapons drifted from their hands, spinning slowly in the air. Lyra was already moving. She grabbed a shock pulse baton from the emergency locker in the control hub and sprinted back toward the hall. The fight was far from over, but the balance had shifted. The first strike had been theirs. The next move would be hers. The control hub was dim and quiet, the hum of machinery filling the narrow space. Lyra Kane moved quickly, her eyes scanning the flickering status screens. The emergency systems were still partially functional, but the raiders had locked out most of the pavilion's automated defenses. She knew she had only minutes before they realized where she had gone. Her fingers moved over the console with practiced precision. She bypassed the main interface and accessed the secondary systems, the ones most attackers overlooked. The gravity stabilizers were still under her control. She adjusted their settings, creating a pattern of sudden shifts that would keep the raiders off balance. As she worked, her mind was calm and focused. Years of military training had taught her to think under pressure. She remembered the Orion border conflicts, the long nights on frozen outposts, the moments when a single decision meant the difference between survival and disaster. She had walked away from that life, but the skills had never left her. A faint sound in the corridor made her pause. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. She reached for the shock pulse baton she had taken from the security locker. The weapon was compact, designed for close combat, and its charge indicator glowed faintly in the low light. The door to the control hub slid open, and Envoy Talrin stepped inside. His scaled face was unreadable, but his eyes held a sharp intelligence. He spoke in a low voice, telling her that the raiders were mercenaries from the Kelvar Syndicate. They had been hired to disrupt the upcoming trade summit and steal the vault's contents. Lyra asked why he was telling her this. Talrin replied that he had been watching her since she started working at the pavilion. He had suspected she was more than she appeared, and now he was certain. He offered to distract the raiders again, giving her the time she needed to finish her plan. She nodded once, then returned to the console. She rerouted power from the decorative lighting to the environmental controls. The air circulation in the main hall would now shift in sudden bursts, creating crosswinds that would make it harder for the raiders to aim their weapons. Combined with the gravity changes, it would turn the room into a battlefield they could not control. Talrin left without another word. Lyra waited until she heard the distant sound of his voice in the main hall, speaking to the raider leader. She activated the sequence. In the dining area, the gravity surged again, pinning the attackers to the floor. A moment later, it dropped, sending them drifting upward. Then the air currents kicked in, spinning them in unpredictable directions. The guests huddled together, confused but unharmed. The raiders, however, struggled to regain control. Their formation broke apart, and their weapons floated from their hands. Lyra saw her chance. She slipped into the service corridor and moved toward the main hall. Her steps were silent, her grip firm on the baton. She emerged behind one of the disoriented raiders and struck, the shock pulse discharging with a sharp crack. The attacker collapsed instantly. Another raider turned toward her, but the shifting gravity pulled him sideways into a table. She closed the distance and struck again, dropping him before he could recover. The remaining attackers were trying to regroup, but the constant changes in gravity and air pressure kept them off balance. Lyra moved with precision, each strike calculated. She was not reckless. She knew that one mistake could cost lives. Her focus was absolute, her breathing steady. She had been trained for situations like this, and every movement showed it. In the center of the room, the leader of the raiders grabbed Envoy Talrin by the arm, pulling him close as a shield. His weapon was pressed against the envoy's side. He shouted for the systems to be restored and for a clear path to the exit. Lyra stopped, her eyes locked on the leader. She lowered the baton slightly, her posture calm. She spoke in a steady voice, offering herself in exchange for the envoy. The leader hesitated, studying her. There was something in her tone that made him wary. As he shifted his stance, Lyra's foot pressed against a hidden floor panel. With a soft click, the panel released and the leader dropped into a containment field below. The energy barrier sealed instantly, trapping him. The remaining raiders froze, their leader gone, and their formation broken. Pavilion security, finally back online, surged into the room. Within moments, the attackers were restrained. Lyra stepped back, letting the security team take over. Envoy Talrin approached her, his expression thoughtful. He told her that her actions had not only saved lives, but had preserved the fragile peace between several worlds. She said nothing, simply nodding before turning toward the service station. The guests were already whispering about the human server who had fought like a soldier. As she walked away, she knew the night was not over. There would be questions, and there would be consequences. But for now, the danger had passed. The hidden commander had revealed herself, and nothing would be the same again. The main hall of the Starlight Pavilion was a scene of controlled chaos. Security teams moved quickly to restrain the last of the raiders, their weapons now powerless against the restored defense systems. Guests whispered in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward the human server who had fought like a trained soldier. Lyra Kane stood near the edge of the room, her breathing steady, her shock pulse baton lowered, but still in her grip. Envoy Tauren approached her, his scaled features calm, but his eyes sharp with understanding. He told her that the attack had been more than a simple raid. The Kelvar Syndicate had been hired to destroy the fragile trust between several trade factions. If they had succeeded, the upcoming summit would have collapsed, and the galaxy would have been pushed closer to open conflict. Lyra listened without speaking. She had heard similar stories before, in different places, under different skies. Power struggles were never about the people in the room. They were about the billions who would feel the consequences far away from the polished floors and crystal walls. The leader of the security team stepped forward, asking for her report. She gave it in short, precise sentences, leaving out the details of her past. She had no interest in explaining how she knew the tactics to counter a professional strike team. As the last of the raiders were escorted out, the guests began to recover from their shock. Some returned to their tables, speaking in low voices. Others left quickly, unwilling to remain in a place that had so recently been under attack. But the story of what had happened was already spreading. Lyra returned to the service station, placing the baton on the counter. Her hands were steady, but her mind was turning over the events of the night. She had wanted a quiet life, far from the battles and decisions that shaped the galaxy. Yet here she was, standing in the aftermath of another fight. Her choices once again altering the course of events far beyond her own world. Envoy Tauren joined her at the counter. He placed a small, sealed data crystal on the surface. He told her it contained an invitation, a position within a new diplomatic security initiative, one that would operate quietly behind the scenes to prevent incidents like this before they began. She looked at the crystal but did not touch it. She asked why he was offering it to her. Tauren replied that he had seen many species and many kinds of courage, but what she had done tonight was rare. She had acted without hesitation, not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. The offer was tempting, but Lyra knew what it meant. Accepting it would pull her back into a life of constant vigilance, into a world where every decision carried weight and risk. Refusing it would mean returning to the quiet routine she had built for herself, serving drinks and staying invisible. The hum of the pavilion's systems filled the silence between them. Outside the crystal walls, Mars turned slowly, its red surface glowing under the distant sun. She thought of the guests she had protected, of the fragile peace that had been preserved, and of the countless lives that would never know how close they had come to disaster. She also thought of the years she had spent trying to leave that life behind, of the nights when she had convinced herself that she had done enough. Tauren waited patiently, his gaze steady. He told her there was no need to decide immediately. The crystal would remain active for one lunar cycle. After that, the offer would be withdrawn. Lyra picked up the crystal, feeling its smooth surface against her palm. It was light, but it carried the weight of a choice that could change not just her future, but the futures of many others. She slipped it into her pocket and returned to her duties. The guests still needed service, and the pavilion still needed order. She moved between tables with the same quiet precision as before, but now every step felt different. As the night drew to a close, the last of the guests departed. The staff began clearing the tables, their voices low as they spoke about the events they had witnessed. Lyra worked alongside them, saying little. When the final lights dimmed and the pavilion settled into silence, she stood by the panoramic window. Mars hung below, silent and vast. The stars stretched out beyond it, endless and waiting. She reached into her pocket and touched the data crystal. She did not yet know what her answer would be, but she knew one thing with certainty. The choice she made would not just be about her. It would be about the kind of galaxy she wanted to live in, and the kind of person she was willing to be. The night had begun with her as a quiet server, unnoticed and underestimated. It ended with her holding the power to shape events far beyond the walls of the Starlight Pavilion. The choice was hers, and whatever she decided, the stars would remember.